he took a retainer and he gave me a game plan, basically, about 40 page of game plan on how we were going to achieve the mission. And that was, to make Nikki the victim, and how there's prenups and, all kinds of fun stuff that, happen in divorce. And I got this, and for some reason, I didn't read it. I never picked it up. I never, for about 2 weeks. And then I was on a plane back from LA, and I took it out of my backpack and I started reading it. And I got about 2 pages into it, and I had not to be too dramatic, but a moment of clarity. For the first time in a long time, I understood that this could not be all Nikki's fault. That if I went down this path, I knew where that path ended, because my parents had a not so happy divorce, and yet I was still going down the same path, because that's really all I knew. I think, luckily, I think it's changing because of lawyers like yourselves and other people who are coming out and sharing their story. But in the 80s, it was sort of just one way of doing divorce, and it was warfare. It was using kids as weapons for that war. And so I knew where that path ended all along, and yet I was still going to go through it, go down it. And on that plane, that moment, I decided to take a different path. And what that path was, I had no idea. I just knew that if I went down, this destruction of Nikki, I was not only going to destroy myself, but I was going to destroy my son. And he was going to have to grow up with the same nonsense that I did. And, it was no fun. And so I read 3 pages. It cost me a lot of money, because I called the lawyer on Monday and I said, can I have, decided to take a different route, can you send me my retainer back? And I got a check for a very small amount back. But it was worth every penny of it. And so now what? Now I know I want to go a different direction, but what I realized, and I knew deep down inside me, and I was able to see on that plane, is that it takes 2 to make a relationship, and it takes 2 to bring. And wherever I have resentment or wherever I have anger, I have a part in it. And so I had to accept the fact that, although I couldn't see it now, that I did at some point, which turned out to be bigger, but at that moment, at some point, I had a part in the marriage. And through a process of Nikki was going through it, and I was going through it too, and hers was in a different capacity, but I called her and I said, I need some time. I can't go through this divorce. Nothing's changed. I think we both agree that we should get married, but I said, I can't go through this process that I know is going to be emotional. I know it's going to push all those buttons that we just talked about, and to be in fear, resentment, anger, is no place to make any life decision from. No decision at all, much less major life decision. So, we both worked on ourselves, and we went through a process, and the net result of that process was realizing that, for me anyways, and I think Nikki, if she were here, she would agree the same thing, is I wouldn't want him to be married to me either. I was a miserable man. I wasn't the father I was supposed to be. I wasn't the husband I was supposed to be, or that I thought I was anyways. And so after that point, I then called Nikki, and I called her and I asked her to coffee. And I started the conversation by saying I was sorry. And I was sorry for my part in the marriage, and I don't blame her. And this was my part. And I didn't even expect her, there was no expectations of her saying, yeah, I'll take the other half, or I'll take this was just for me to clean up, the wreckage of my doings. And so we had that. I said I was sorry. I told her I loved her. And I told her I'm sorry for getting in love and love confused. And I understand I wasn't a good husband. And it doesn't matter who did what or who didn't do what, who went in their cave, if anybody went out. Those were all, symptoms. And so then in turn, she apologized to me. and we joke because actually we got in a fight 2 nights ago, and neither one of us apologized, but it's fine. But it was the only time that we can remember that we actually authentically, sincerely apologized to each other in the 20-something years we've known each other. But it was the most important. And anyways, that at that space, it didn't, again, click our heels and make it our happy divorce. But we'd cleaned up the wreckage of the past. And we no longer had to make decisions based on the past. And we could move forward and live in the present and live in the now. And that's where happiness happens, but that's where also good decisions happen. And so, look, it was a pretty easy thing we came up with. It's simple, not by any means, but it was pretty easy. And that was simply that we just decided at that moment to make decisions based on what was best for Ashley. So keeping it as simple as possible, looking back on it, 2 + 2 = 4. And I think in divorce, sometimes a simple equation can end up a much different answer to different people, right? And so what we decided was that we would make decisions on what was best for Asher, but in hindsight, basically what it was 2 + 2 had to equal 4 for him. And sometimes, let me tell you, those decisions and those choices, 2 + 2 felt like it equaled $1 million for me and for Nikki on sometimes. But as long as that equals 4 for him, we went ahead with it. And that included, the process of divorce, the custody, the financial settlement. And we went out and we hired 2 collaborative lawyers. But then we did something that at the time, it was probably a little crazy, but I said, let's just try to see where we agree. We might not even, there might be areas we don't even know we agree upon. And so we actually went back to the same coffee shop. And the first question I asked her was, does she have any problem with joint custody, joint, 50-50, everything with our son across the board? And she said, absolutely not. I said, Nikki, the rest of the stuff we can work out, and let's just see if we can work it out. And over the next, 5 to 6, 7, I don't remember exactly how many meetings, we hammered out our whole divorce scheme. It wasn't small, it wasn't a small combined assets. But again, it doesn't matter. People ask us all the time, well, you guys have money or you have this and that. And I'm sure that everybody can attest on this call. I hope it doesn't matter if it's $100 million or $1,000. It's an issue because it goes to financial insecurity. And those are one of the sorry for language, but the FU buttons that I talk about. So we then went to our lawyers and said, here's the argument, here's what we decided upon. And we got it worked out. I didn't expect it to be worked out that way, but it did. Once we had this, what was best for Ashley and what was best for his financial future, what was best for where he was going to live, what was best for him across the board. So that's, along the past 13 years, that's where we've, made and based our decisions. A perfect example is this COVID. And we luckily live 5 houses down from each other. So the good news is that of us getting along is that nothing really changed, right? So because our sphere of, except for it benefited because our sphere of quarantine was extended because he was the one going in between the 2 houses. So he was the outbreak monkey. So if he was going to get sick, he was going to bring it to the other house. So we just decided to, and we didn't live together or self-quarantine together. But we were able to hang out and be a family. But during the day, I have 2 kids with my wife, and they're young and they're clingy. They love their big brother. And I'm sure everybody who's worked from home knows how hard it is to work from home with kids. So what was best for Asher was, even on my days, is that he went to Nikki's, where he's an only child, to do his schoolwork. Now, 2 + 2 might not equal 4 for me in that situation, right? That is my time. It's my, I'm at home. This is my half split. But at the end of the day, it equals 4 for him because he can have a quiet place to study and he can do. So that's, sort of the keep it simple, stupid motto that we've gone through. It hadn't been easy, and that's something we try to tell people. along the way that if you had asked us 13 years ago what we would have wanted out of our divorce, the answer probably would have been just to be in the same room together. Just to be able to be at Asher's events or Asher's sporting school events or sporting events and not have that palpable tension that so often happens around divorced couples. And then in the beginning, like I said, it was simple, but it wasn't easy, and it took a lot of faking it until we made it, really, and putting on our big boy pants and sort of putting the ego aside and smiling when the insides were twisting and turning, especially when you bring somebody else new into the relationship, and that person's around my son, and vice versa, that person's around Nikki's son, and putting him to bed is what Nikki always talks about. Really got her in the beginning, but everybody is putting on the big boy pants, and the net result is something, like I said, that we could never have imagined, and we put our son first, and in turn we don't have to live with that resentment, that anger, that living in the past, and we've let it all go. And in turn, because we put our son first, we have a much happier life, and our spouses both were remarried, have better lives, that they don't have to be married into this toxic, traumatic environment that so many do. Just cap it off with in August, Nikki and I took Asher to Africa on a safari, just the three of us. And it was one of those things that, romance, finance wasn't going to send our divorce sideways or upside down. It was that if one of the other parents had taken Asher to Africa on a safari, because as a kid, Dr. Seuss books weren't his thing. He wanted to read animal encyclopedias, and he was just, anybody who has kids, kids usually gravitate towards, one thing, and his was animals. He knew every animal that probably known to man, and so we always knew we wanted to take him to Africa, and it wasn't. I don't like the way I say this. It kind of sounds kind of flippant, but it wasn't like our spouses weren't invited. But Nikki's husband is the sheriff of Hillsborough County, and my wife is raising two small kids, so it just didn't work in their plan. So when I went to my wife and told her, her response was, "Oh hell no, you're not going to Africa with your ex-wife. Are you out of your mind?" It was, Asher will love that. What a great experience. And same with Chad. So they have been committed to this thing too. They know that there's nothing between Nikki and I except for we love each other and we love our child, and our son. And I'm glad to say nobody was killed in Africa. Nobody was. I'm sure Nikki. There's some pretty creepy pictures of her taking of me, or looking over the lion's den. It could be easily pushed, but it's great. So this book was just, the advent of social media came along. It sounds so crazy, but 13 years ago there's MySpace, but there were no divorce co-parenting blogs on MySpace or support groups. But we just started sharing our life on social media like people do, and people are like, "What are you guys doing? Like, what is happening here?" It was like we were posting in another language. So people started talking about what a great story you have. And then we started talking to friends of ours would call us and ask us, we get different responses. Like one of my friends in Canada got divorced, and his wife looked straight at him and said, "Don't think we're going to be like those effing help fans." And others have called for counsel, and we've been able to give them advice and what we did and how we handled it, and of our advice and our inspiration. So I pulled, and the real reason it took 4 years was because I wanted to do this. It was my idea. Nikki wasn't. She's a more reserved person, and it's hard to get her to do it. But I would never have done this project without Nikki. This is maybe the second time we've had an event, or somebody's asked us to talk, or a podcast that I've done alone, because again, it takes two to make it. It takes two to break it. And our happy divorce wouldn't be around if Nikki wasn't as committed to it as me. And so I know she's sorry she couldn't make it. Yeah, I guess, I hope I didn't talk too long.
No, you're great. We actually have a couple of questions that have come in. So I will encourage everyone else to please type your questions in the chat box, and we can kind of put Ben on the spot here for a second.
If you haven't told, I'm an open book, so no question is off limits, except for one that we don't talk about in the book. If you're looking for drama, or you're looking for any sort of nefarious actions, or who did what or who didn't do what, it's not in there, because first